Welcome to ProBlogacy. I am Vero, and with me, as always, is the lovely Jessica. Jessica, say hi to everybody.
Hello.
that, Thank you for expanding on that greeting. Anyway, today we've got some pretty heavy stuff to talk about a little bit later on, and we've got a special guest coming in for that. But first, I wanted to kind of intro a new feature on ProBlogacy, Forum Talk. I know, snazzy title and everything, but basically we're gonna chat about a couple of the topics that have been up on the forum recently that piqued our interest. And I'll get started right away. The one that really interests me, and it has spawned a couple of spin-off threads, I guess you'd call it, is the poll: should we introduce quote unquote sub races or ethnicities uh, for human RP? And there seems to be an overwhelming majority saying yes. And some of the discussion on the thread is whether or not it's appropriate to bring those in, seeing as how some of those ethnic and cultural backgrounds are being represented by other races, and are we taking away from the not necessarily the uniqueness, but the flavor of those races by introducing them as ethnic and cultural groups among the human RPers. I wanted to get your take on it, Jessica. How do you feel about the whole let's bring in a bunch of ethnic and culture thingies for humans?
Well, I don't know. I was always, from the beginning, T-Mog, I was always in the area of, if you can pull it off and people buy it, I don't see an issue with it.
Well, granted, I
Like,
mean,
I'm not going to say, like, one way or another, like, yeah, we'll allow it or we'll disallow something. Like, if you try to RP something and people just think it's silly, then that's one thing. But if people actually, like, if you're a serious RPer and you can make it believable, then. I mean, most of that topic I just saw people complain about there was too many white folks in Azeroth.
well,
Like, really? That's how I read it. There's
well,
too many white folks in Azeroth.
I get that point of view, because it does seem like a lot of them, and by a lot I mean pretty much every single freaking one
Yeah, I'm trying
of
to
the
think of, like,
lower NPCs.
yeah, I'm trying to think of an NPC in game that's darker than clear, and I can't think of many. Like, it's really hard to think. Maybe some of the pirates, but I would say that's a tan. But yeah, like, I can't really think of any NPCs that aren't white. Nope, still can't think of any.
Yeah, it's and I do understand that point of view, and I get that in some of the previous phases there were guilds and groups and whatnot, centered around the Tanaris human roleplay, and I was always a fan of those, but I mean, it just seems to me like the setting as a whole is primarily European medieval, which, if you look at in its influence from the human
Yeah.
lore standpoint, it's very European medieval. And if you look at that era in our own history, it's pretty much all white folks anyway. Which
True,
I'm not saying
but
that's what we need to be aiming for,
but
but
then I could draw parallels to gender roles as well, and clearly that is not as defined. Women obviously hold positions in the army and stuff like that. I mean,
exactly.
so I would say like one could say, well, it would make sense then that the people of Azeroth would be somewhat colorblind, But in the end, it's the people who create the game and make these NPCs that they probably have never considered that, hey, maybe we should put a more broader spectrum in pigmentation with our NPCs.
Well, and then that brings up one of my concerns is why does there have to be a focus on like introducing diversity in skin pigmentation when the options are there to an extent?
Yeah, they are there.
Yeah. So why should we if we're looking at introducing the cultural aspects of those groups and we're saying that we should be colorblind to it, well then why should the color of the character even matter, really? I mean,
yeah.
You
honestly, I think this all stemmed from, I think somebody made like a topic about Tanari and like their lore and stuff, and which was never really fleshed out by the creators.
Oh yeah, it was very lacking.
So the players of Prologue kind of filled in the holes, and for the longest time it's been accepted as Tanari lore amongst the players. And then people started complaining like, well, no, it's custom lore, you can't make it up because these other cultures don't exist. This is how the humans are in Azeroth, and this is how it should stay, because anything else is different, and we don't like it.
Right. And
so that's all I heard, really.
That drags us down into the custom lore versus no custom lore argument, which we'll get into that later, because that brings up something I want to talk about later on in the episode. So for now, I would like to leave it at for everyone to think about and consider. This is just my opinion here on the whole, bringing in different ethnicities and cultural groups and whatnot into human lore. I'm with you, honestly. Do it, and if you can do it well and you can get other players to accept it, then more power to you. But I don't think we should necessarily be going out of our way as a community to I hesitate to use the word, but it's the only one I can think of, to force that decision on the entire community.
Ruin everybody's fun time?
Yeah, basically that.
I call it.
All right, and then we were talking a bit earlier, and now I had completely spaced. There was one topic on the forum that you brought up when we were chatting earlier, that you wanted.
Oh, was it about the age, people wanting?
Oh,
an age?
Yeah. Go for it. That's all you.
Oh, no, it's just, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I didn't read the topic in depth. So what was the basic premise of the whole? What was the point of it?
It's basically what people feel is the lowest acceptable age to play a character.
That's a tough topic, because, I mean, doesn't really that comes down to, you'd have to separate that out by the racial group, and by race I mean the WoW, the WoW term, which is more but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Well, like, I have to say, I've RP'd a 14-year-old, but, like, I think people are just worried, like, hey, like, people doing something dodgy with said character. And when I say dodgy, I'm talking about mainly the human group.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, no.
That then boils down to less of a what age is appropriate or how young is appropriate, and more of what type of role play is appropriate for certain character types.
And that kind of role play isn't really allowed anyways. So
officially.
So yeah, kitty diddling role play, guys, don't do it.
Right. Seriously, that's. I mean, not again, not to rain on anyone's RP fun parade, but just whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa. That's all I gotta say. Is whoa.
But yeah, so I don't know.
Well, but then,
Like,
I mean, let's expand on that a little bit because it sounds like the topic is basically revolving around the human aspect of it. But like, for example, like Tauren or troll culture, I would assume that, and I don't know the specifics of the aging process among those races. But if we're using human equivalents, like modern human equivalents,
yeah.
like I could see legitly like a 14, 15-year-old Tauren or troll or the equivalent thereof, of
Yeah.
because in those particular cultures, that would be someone who, depending on tradition and whatnot, may have earned their place as an adult within their community.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, to be fair, I think it was in I think it was in 1.3. I remember a weaver playing a child who was selling lottery tickets. And when I say child, like they had morphed themselves into like the little boy
Oh,
model. And like to be honest, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, it was only for whatever amount of time they were selling these little raffle tickets or whatnot for.
hmm.
Like I can see, yeah, not letting people RP a child all the time, but once in a while having an interactable child to RP with, I don't see a problem with.
Well, but then
Otherwise, we live in a world where everybody's like post puberty.
and that's a little unrealistic.
Yeah,
Of course, then
just a little
again,
bit.
we're role playing in a very, very high fantasy setting with dragons and orcs and aliens. So realism may be a bit of a stretch, but I mean, but what about? I mean, I have seen some. Well, I'm going to preface this. I have seen some very, very, very questionable role play regarding children in the whole. And this is in other areas. I haven't seen it on Prologue yet. I don't know if it's there or I just haven't experienced it. But anyway, I've seen questionable role play where two characters are in a relationship and they have a child together and then someone else plays the child, but then in most cases there's not a system set up or even options set up to visually represent that child, and normally there's a magical or technological or whatever induced aging process where you start off you role play that you're pregnant, and instead of it being like a typical 9 month gestation period, the kid is born 2 weeks later, and then another week later it's a full grown adult. Seen some very, very questionable role play on that.
Well, to be okay. Well, I would assume if our phases lasted longer,
Okay, fair
we
enough.
could see a full gestation period. But yeah, I
But
don't think. Yeah, like I'm one of those really hardcore people. Like if something takes a certain amount of time, I'm going to make sure in real life it takes that certain amount of time. I don't push a fast forward button, but I can see people speeding up the process because really, like, I
you want to
mean,
get to the meat of the role play.
yeah, because it is. It's kind of like people playing out their own little dramas, and I can understand. Like, it's like reading a book. You don't. It starts building up, and you don't put it down
Yeah.
and wait a bit. No, you want to get there as soon as possible, so you keep reading. And it's the same way with role play. You just don't want to stop. You want to keep going. You want to get to that good part as soon as you can. And so, if that means a time skip, even if it's just for you, people do it.
Well, and again, I think it comes down to the kind of conclusion that you and I agreed on the last topic. Do it, and if you can get other other players to accept what you're doing with it, more power to you. And I think you and I are pretty much on the same page of the live and let live attitude towards roleplay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to talk about those couple of topics. Was there anything else that had hit recently that really got you thinking?
I don't think so.
Oh, there was one that I really liked, and I just wanted to highlight the forum thread and get people to go take a look at it. And I'll post a link to it down in the information on the video here. TAPS put together a preliminary guide on rethinking archetypes, and how a lot of archetypes are tried and true in our roleplay, but it can get a little bit cliche when everybody's doing the archetypes the same way, and kind of tips on how we can approach these archetypes from a new direction and shine a new light on them. And I won't go into a lot of details on it because I want everyone to go take a read at it, or take a look and read it. But it's in the guides section, in the player created guides. It's called Rethinking Archetypes, a guide, and it's by TAPS. Go check it out. If you've got anything you feel like you can contribute constructively, by all means do so. I'm working on one that I'm going to hopefully have up within a day or two of this recording. But yeah, just wanted to throw that one out there because that one seemed like a really good start, and we could all take a tip or two from. Just whether you're playing one of these archetypes or not, it's just a good idea to think about how you're playing what your archetype is, and rethinking it and shining new light on it. Anyway, okay, so those are the threads that recently popped up that we took some interest in. So I wanted to get into. I said earlier that we had some pretty heavy stuff to talk about, and to do so, we have invited back the man, the myth, the legend, FireFighter himself. How's it going, FireFighter?
Pretty good, thank you. How
Good.
are things going at your end? I'm not used to being played up so much. I'm just here doing a job like everybody else.
Well,
my job
he's hoping for a
be
promotion.
A promotion to advisor or retired, maybe.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, really, where my position lies, I'm not quite sure where I'd get promoted to, if that's even possible.
Oh, you're looking. I thought you meant I was looking for a promotion, because I don't think I have anywhere else.
No, yeah,
go.
he's looking for a promotion.
Yeah, she was saying I was sucking
That's
up.
why he's kissing your ass.
Anyway, I know you had a couple things you wanted to come in and share with us and the rest of the community. So, FireFighter, why don't you go ahead and take it away, and we'll tag along for the ride and pop in and ask some questions as you go.
Excellent. One of the main things I wanted to talk about today was the use of reputations and faction IDs and whatnot, and some of the ideas we have for Legacy. And we might try some of these ideas out in the sandbox as well in the future, depending on how well the coders can put the scripts together for us.
So, and is this tying in with the Griffinheart project, or is this something that we're kind of doing separate of working with? Because I know I pay attention to the Griffinheart development, and I know they've got some stuff there. Is this how's this relate there?
This is separate from Griffinheart. The Griffinheart Groups project is an amazing add-on that we've only just begun to really start playing with because it doesn't want to work well in the older 3.3.5a core. It's really geared towards the new 5.2 whatever retail is in. I stopped paying attention to retail a while ago, back when I was rating, the stockades, I think. Anyway, so it's a great add-on, and I've seen it in action. It looks great, but this is more for the the stock reputations, like you have your Stormwind rep or your Orgrimmar rep or your Honorhold rep, things like that. One of the things we had wanted to address, for example, was the players that complain about getting killed or executed basically within sight of guard NPCs, and those guard NPCs just stand there like regular police officers do and do nothing sometimes, and how frustrating that is. And then of course that filters down to the community team has to investigate each one of these claims, and they have to give refunds and so on and so on. So we started working on a system. I started working on a system. I've run it by some of the coders, and they definitely think it is achievable to work with reputations and whatnot, so that this kind of thing doesn't happen in Legacy.
So sort of a living reputation, as it were, like it changes and adjusts on the fly.
Well, one of the things we had talked about is, if you execute somebody, you can literally be standing on a Stormwind Guard NPC, and they will do nothing. They won't stop you, they won't interact, whatever. We tried using the Booty Bay Bruisers, and they seem to like to kill everything, because they don't really discriminate between aggressors and non-aggressors. They just start attacking everybody. They also,
and you can trick them to attack.
Yes, you can use some of the rogue abilities and hunter abilities, misdirection, tricks of the trade, to pass that around and have them attack people you don't like.
Oh.
Yeah. So one of the concepts we're working on is actually setting a guard reputation. So, say all of your alliance guards would have a separate reputation that all of the alliance players would be friendly with. Therefore, they can interact, come and go as needed. But when you execute somebody, there's a script tied to the execute that actually temporarily drops your guard rep from friendly to hated. So if you're within aggro distance or view distance, they will come running at you. But just the person who does the execute, not anybody else. So they'll only attack the one person. Of course, it'll just be a temporary drop of maybe, a minute, 2 minutes or so. So it doesn't handicap the player, so they can't go back into the city. And then once the timer's up, their reputation returns to normal.
Now, have you figured out how that's going to work with, just a hypothetical? I'm playing Jerry the Bandit out in Elwyn Forest. And occasionally I'll go into Stormwind to ply my ill-begotten goods. And for all intents and purposes, the Stormwind guards don't have any evidence that I've stolen these, so they can't really do anything to me. Now, so I'm still on friendly terms with them. Well, a really, really bad job happens out in the middle of Elwyn, completely out of earshot, eye contact, whatever, from anyone who could qualify as a guard, and I wind up executing my victim. But that's out there. No one knows it. No one can see it. Am I still going to have that temporary drop with Stormwind guards, so I have to wait to go back in? Or
that's the temporary drop shouldn't last very long. It should basically last one PvE encounter, which is approximately 30 seconds to a minute.
Okay.
So basically just long enough for the guard to aggro onto you and to start attacking you, and for you to either react and attack back or run away.
Okay. So then basically if I'm not within the aggro range, the viewing
Yes.
distance of the guard, it's going to have no effect on me whatsoever. But
That's correct.
any guard that is in view that I do this in view of is going to come at me with a vengeance.
That's the theory. We haven't tested it yet, and it's still just concept stage, but we're hoping that will deter people from committing acts of execution within, the proximity of guards or guard NPCs, because they will retaliate. One of the other scripts we're looking at is such as a pickpocket script, where you can actually attempt to pickpocket somebody, and if it fails, then the guards will also aggro onto you.
Yeah, and so basically just using the rogue pickpocket skill with a chance of failure.
Yeah, it would be its own command, such as the execute command. So it would be an execute command that you could perform, and it would have a fairly lengthy cooldown on, so you can't spam it.
Right. And
so there would be a certain percentage chance, for a regular pickpocket to succeed, you might get 5 silver. If you're thinking about a rolling system, if you're successful, you get a reward. If you have a critical success, you get double the reward, and if you have a critical penalty, your reputation will drop for a few moments.
I like it. Now that just to expand on that one a little bit, because I'm a fan of the pickpocket command concept there. That's very, very intriguing to me. To expand on a little bit, if, for example, I'm playing, we'll say we've got Jerry the Bandit, and we also have Carlos the Paladin. If I'm on Carlos the Paladin and I go to try to pickpocket someone, I don't think it should necessarily have as high a chance of success as if I were on Jerry the Bandit, who's that type of character. Is that something that we're considering kind of coding in, like bonuses and penalties based on class and role? Or is that
well, that's where the progression tool will tie in. So everybody will get the basic pickpocket type of command, which has a fairly high fail rate, because you're just an average person trying to slip your hand into somebody's pocket and take something. But as you progress and you gain your progression points, which we're still working on a term for that, you'll be able to invest in a better pickpocket command with a higher success rate.
I like
so
that.
You can gear your character towards that. Now, obviously, that's not going to stop a player who plays a paladin from going for a high pickpocket chance, but I would hope that they would realize that they are a paladin and shouldn't be running around pickpocketing people, because that's not what paladins do.
Well, we can hope in that particular case that'd be something that'd be kind of community policed. If the community player sees that happening, they're going to kind of approach that player and be like, maybe we should rethink what we're doing here.
Definitely. There's a lot of community policing involved. I mean, we can't code a hard code a system that restricts things down by race or class. I mean, we could, but then it would start being a very heavily involved system.
Right.
There's no reason. Maybe a paladin does have a pickpocket skill, and it's a sleight of hand skill. Or maybe
I think it's more that rogues should get perhaps a buff to make their pickpocket more useful, as opposed to somebody playing a paladin or a warrior.
Yeah, and that's something we can integrate into, like, the stat items that we have in Sandbox right now. We can integrate those buffs into those items that are only worn by certain classes.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit on the tricky side. I like that.
Yeah, it makes far more sense to, like, say, skills like that perhaps it should be attached to class rather than a race I know everybody has their racial skills, but classes should have things that they're more adept at than others.
Well, there goes my concept for Carlos the Street Rat Paladin. All right. So anything else in this reputation concept right now that you want to talk about, or really the guard thing, the main focus for tonight?
Well, the guard reputation was one thing that we're playing with. The other concept that I have discussed briefly with the coders is actually having regional reputations for NPC vendors. So you could have such as southeastern kingdoms, central eastern kingdoms, and northeastern kingdoms would be, say, 3 separate regions. So all the vendors in a certain region would have different prices for the same items as vendors in other regions, which we can manipulate because they would be different vendors within the reputation system. So if you wanted to buy, let's say, ore off of a vendor in South Shore, he might be selling it for a different price than the ore vendor in Goldshire. So as the world progresses, perhaps the Forsaken become quite aggressive in northeastern kingdoms and they manage to capture all of the mines up there. All of a sudden the ore prices in the north are going to skyrocket, whereas the ore prices in the south are going to drop down for supply and demand. So crafty players will be able to travel throughout the world to find better prices in better markets and do things to influence, world trade, going to war, discovering new mines, opening and closing mines, cutting down trees, trade pacts and things like that will adjust the prices in different regions so that players can try and profit or risk everything on it.
So we could tie that into the basic sort of supply and demand concepts that were being discussed in the custom profession suggestions and whatnot. The threads that I read on those where the merchant profession, for example, traveling back and forth to the areas, manipulating the supply and demand, and I'm a huge fan of the idea of tying in regional conflict into that too, because blood for oil is always a good thing, right? But I mean that's I'm getting excited about that. Why have I not been included in some of these meetings, man?
Well, that's something like the whole economy thing, like an actual working kind of supply and demand thing was something we talked about before the crash, wasn't it? I remember going over it a little bit.
That's exciting stuff, though. That's wow.
Yeah, well, we had talked about instituting something like that in a future 1.5 patch.
Yeah, we had.
Because we had so many ideas and yet so little time to do it in. The example I'll use from 1.3, if you remember the Scarshield Legion that attacked Lakeshire. So when they attacked Lakeshire, the price of materials in the Lakeshire / Elwyn Forest area would go up. So players that are role-playing in those areas would be feeling the consequences of the war that's happening.
Right.
And crafty players could profit on that by buying ore that might be cheaper in, say, Ratchet, paying the ferry fares to Booty Bay, traveling up through Stranglethorn, dodging the troll tribes to sell it at a profit, and hopefully get there before the war is resolved and they don't lose out on their profit margins.
Very cool. Very, very, very cool. All right, so then other than the reputation on guards and vendors, I can't really... I can't really think of any other reputation changes that would be really super effective like that off the top of my head. You got anything else working?
The only other thing, and this is really, really, really in its infant stages, infant stages, because it's something that's really difficult to code, and something that the players have been asking for as long as I've been on Prologue, is actually to have reputation levels for the guild, so that the guild can have NPCs with a certain reputation, and say other guilds won't be able to enter your camp. So you might have, say, like when Briarwood and Valoran were at odds with each other, they might set their reputations to each other to neutral, so that you can't access their NPCs or their vendors.
That would be, yeah. I can see why that would be hard, because they don't have to have their own unique identifier, and unless we put a limit on how many guilds can be created at a time, we're talking about 20, 30 or more reputations floating around.
Well, but there's...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we're obviously using the 3.3.5a core, but in retail, when Cataclysm launched, they introduced the guild reputation. Actually, I don't remember if that was right when it launched, but in Cataclysm at some point, they had the guild reputation that was tied into, as soon as you joined a guild, you had a reputation with that guild, and obviously it was just a grind factor for retail, where you just had to grind it out, and then you got access to certain things from a generic guild reputation vendor at one of the capitals. But has there been any thought of trying to kind of reverse engineer that concept and include, because it was a built-in reputation tied to every character based on what guild they were in? Have we looked into maybe trying to implement that particular system?
We haven't looked at that system exactly. I think we're going to be really pushing the envelope for what we can do on this core with having so many of the other custom reputations set up, that we might be going with that system specifically a step too far.
Okay. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great, for like somebody who's new joins the guild would have to show their dedication before they move up in the ranks.
Right. Well, and that's something that I've seen tied into certain roleplay add-ons anyway. Like for example, GHI or Total RP2, where they've got like the custom reputations where whoever runs that particular quote-unquote faction can award or take away rep. I mean, that's something that's possible, but I like the idea of hard coding it into the server's features, so that it's not something that necessarily a guild leader has to do, or else their guild doesn't get it. I like the idea of putting it in there so it's there anyway. So I'm interested I'll be keeping an eye on the developments there, because that could lead to so many different possibilities in inter-guild conflict and alliances and whatnot. So I like that idea. Very good.
Yeah, I think the guard reputation and the vendor reputation will certainly be achievable, if we can find the right way to code it and the right way to make it work properly. I have talked to the coders, I've expressed these ideas, and they have said that it is something that is achievable, but just under what circumstances. I mean, we obviously want a system that's going to work, not a system that only works a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Don't want to half-ass anything. All right.
We've cut a lot of corners already, so we don't want to have to cut any more.
Yeah. All right, and then there was some other topics that you had wanted to discuss. What was that next one? crap.
Well, originally that was the only topic I was going to discuss until the episode got rewritten at the last moment. I think while I was sitting in the green room, actually, I was told that we were going to add on.
I didn't know do donations pay for the green room?
Actually, I built the green room myself out of 2x4s and a green tarp. We can speak about donations.
I don't know. See, that's completely a matter of perspective. I would call it more of a chartreuse tarp, but whatever. Yeah, donations. That's something that actually.
Yeah, we do. We need to talk about that.
There's the issues with donations being. I know there's the widget. I think that's right for it. The widget up on the front page of the forums, but there's been some issues with that, and I know you had mentioned something in, I think it was the dev diary.
Looks like it's working now.
Yeah, what's the deal there? What magic did you pull there to get it working?
Well, the original donation add-on that I had there was actually written for a different form system, and I don't think it was quite working properly for the version of the forms that we're using. So I had to basically pretend I was a coder and take it all apart, strip it down to bare bones, and it seems to be working now. It's not nearly as flashy. It doesn't auto-update itself, things like that. But right now I have a working base that I can start adding in some other scripts. Or maybe if someone from the community wanted to help me, then I would certainly be open to that, because I'm not a coder. I think I've expressed that many times over.
I would offer to help you code it, but I think the extent of my coding knowledge is up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, select, start. So obviously anybody out there in the community that has any sort of experience with working with these donation widgets and whatnot that would like to help, I would even say you could consider that a donation of your time and skills to get this up and working, so that we can keep getting in the fundage necessary to keep the server up and running. Firefighter, there was something that I really wanted to talk to you about, so I'm glad you came in tonight, and I'm going to keep you a little bit longer on this. There has been tons and tons of concern, and you and I have had conversations about this. Jessica and I have had conversations about this. The whole staff has had volunteers, storytellers, CTs, legacy developers, the works. The programmers. We've had discussions on this, and I think our discussions on it haven't necessarily filtered into the realm of the rest of the community yet, because it doesn't seem to be clear yet what the intent is for Legacy as of right now. And I'd like to kind of clear this up, because it's very, very contentious. The subject of custom lore in regards to Legacy and the Legacy setting. As of right now, and this is all still, like you've said many times, still very much up in the air. Nothing is concrete yet. But as it stands right now, the Legacy setting that's being discussed, the timeline is almost immediately after the defeat of the Lich King. And the intent from all the discussions I've been a part of has been that everything leading up to that event in the Warcraft lore timeline is going to be essentially untouched by the staff. Like, we're not going to be manipulating anything drastically, even minorly. There'll be maybe a couple little things here and there to just fill up some areas that were neglected by the Blizzard lore team. But otherwise, it's going to be pretty much, as it stands right now, canon leading up till that moment. Then from there, that's where custom lore may happen, and that just all depends on player actions. Am I completely off base with anything I've just said, or is that kind of where we're going?
No, I think you've pretty much nailed it for the most part. We don't want to go back. We're going to draw our line where Legacy starts, and everything before that, as you said, will become canonized. We don't want to dabble and get our fingers in that very deeply, because that is going to upset people as they try and create their characters, because now they have to create those characters based on something completely different. That was one of the biggest complaints with the original lore that we had set out for TMOG, was that people couldn't wrap their heads around all of the changes to come up with a decent character concept. So basically, everything that happened, whether you agree with it, whether you love it, whether you hate it, has happened. And everything that's going to happen hasn't happened yet.
Right, and that ties into another very contentious area in the discussion of what will be good about Legacy, what's going to blow monkey chunks about Legacy, is, well, we don't want to go into Cataclysm. We're going to be shoehorned into going into Cataclysm, and no, that's...
Which is like 3 years away, so they don't have to worry about that anytime soon.
Right,
even if we do, for whatever reason, decide, yes, we're going to start Cataclysm, it's going to be another 3 freaking years. And I'd honestly be surprised if they last that long, considering our previous phases.
Well, I mean, obviously, the intent at some point is going to be, let's have not necessarily a permanent phase, but this is what Prologue is. It is ongoing, and we're going to want to have a very, very extended phase in comparison to some of the previous ones. But even if it's going to be something that, if we look at, let's start this hypothetically tomorrow. Let's say Legacy launches tomorrow, and it is literally at the point of, this is 3 days after the Lich King has been defeated. Go have fun. Even 3 years away from that, if the Legacy phase is still up and running at that point, 3 years from then, all the stuff that led into Cataclysm there was lore events happening left and right that the players, just by the nature of what Prologue is, the players are going to be able to have an effect on that, and they could prevent it if they don't want Cataclysm happening, right?
That's correct. Everybody automatically assumes when you say post-Lich King that it means Cataclysm, just because Cataclysm came after.
Right.
But a lot of people don't realize that there's a fair bit of time between the death of the Lich King and the start of Cataclysm. There are roots in it that go back, even before, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to go down that road. We're trying to establish a setting that has as many open doors as possible, whereas other time eras that we had looked at, such as the Burning Crusade and Vanilla, pre-Vanilla, even going back to Warcrafts 1, 2, and 3, just had too many closed doors for creating your own storylines. A lot of people will agree that Cataclysm did not have the best lore associated with it, so let's rewrite that lore, draw the line just before Cataclysm, or a couple years before Cataclysm, and we'll go down our own road now. We don't necessarily have to have the Elemental Uprising. We don't have to have the Tauren discovering and getting paladins and priests. That's something the players can decide to do in game. That's something that they might not even pursue whatsoever. So let's let the players decide what happens.
There you go. Thank you. That's
Well, yeah, I think people are just getting confused because it's like, will we have a lore board? But it's just for discussion of, like, WoW lore in general. It's not, like, preparing for us to write something for them. No, it's, we want them, basically, custom lore will come into play, but it will be done by the players. We're not going to hand them a binder full of custom lore that they have to memorize and then base a character off of. That's not how it's going to happen.
Now, and this tying in with the whole concerns about the setting. The big thing that was bugging me was the whole custom lore versus no custom lore argument. But another one that I can understand the concerns, but I'd like to touch on it and see where we're standing on a what are we going to do about this point of view. There's a lot of concern about lack of substantial antagonists in the Lichfall era, as it were. And I can understand the concern because at that point in the official Blizzard lore for the Warcraft universe, there's not a whole lot in the way of big bads, as it were. There's some that are out there, but they were never really focused on by Blizzard's lore team. Is that something where we're gonna take some of those big bads that are out there and were neglected and do something with them, or are we looking at maybe introducing some new and unexpected antagonists, or somewhere in the middle, or is it still too early to really say on any of that?
Well, I think in the retail environment, you're always going up against the biggest and the baddest boss at the end of the raid. But in Prologue, when you're role-playing, and you're a soldier or a farmer or a baker or a hunter, you're not necessarily going to be on that cutting edge to be at the spearhead of the advance into enemy territory. You're going to be the guy that's delivering the mail or cooking the soup or something along those lines. It's not that high of an adventure. You're role playing. You're not going through a single person or a one person campaign where you're doing everything. So the necessity of a super big ultra bad guy villain is replaced by smaller villains that are just equally as deadly and equally as menacing, but are more likely for the average person to encounter. These are going to be your local warlords, your corrupt politicians, your evil corporations, if you're thinking about the ratchet cartels and things like that. Definitely bad guys to fight against. Maybe not the king bad guy, the ultra bad guy, but still big enough of an antagonist that you'll want to take them down.
Got it. So more of a personal evil than a world-encompassing evil.
Yeah, and I think that's going to offer more variety for players because, you're going to have a number of different storylines with a number of these antagonists going on at the same time. And it'll be a lot like, when the Allies first got together during the early parts of World War II, they had to make a decision. Which axis or axis of evil were they going to attack first? Were they going to focus on Japan or were they going to focus on Germany? They decided on a Germany first policy. So the players will have to get together and they might have 2 or 3, entry mediocre level antagonists that they're going to have to deal with. So maybe they're going to want to hold one where they are and attack another, or maybe they'll want to try and use them against each other. It could be any number of different things out there, but it'll be a little bit more realistic, more hands-on, more personal, and not so worldwide.
Well, and then there's also the possibility, I don't think it's been discussed yet anywhere that I've seen, there's a possibility of player-run antagonist factions. It may not be necessarily of the scope of some of the storyteller-driven antagonist factions, but there's always the possibility of a player group of antagonists messing with other player characters too. So there's that. That hasn't been completely discounted from a systems point of view, right? We're not going to just outright say no, you can't play bad guys, right?
No, in fact, I encourage players to look at antagonist guilds in Legacy because, as we both know from retail, Vero, there can be a lot of fun and entertainment had in playing a gray character or a dark character.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily the gold and white character. One of my characters in retail, as you know, was secretly ran an arms business.
Yes.
And was selling weapons to both the Horde and the Alliance secretly. And yet they were, in the public's eye, an outstanding model citizen of the Alliance. Did everything to support the Alliance, and yet when no one was looking, they were down in Ratchet or Booty Bay making deals to supply arms to the other faction at a profit.
Yeah. Well, and that's that. I personally, I'm gonna be looking for other players to help organize this. But during Legacy, I already have some plans on a fairly antagonistic group. May not necessarily be of the level of we're going to kill all these guilds that are around us, but because my playtime's going to be a little bit limited, obviously working on stuff on the staff end of things. But I'm glad that we're not just discounting player-run antagonists right off the bat, because I would be very upset with you. All right, well, I appreciate the information there, and thank you for indulging Jessica and I with our questions and our concerns as well. Firefighter, again, I thank you again for coming in.
I thank you for having me. I guess the important thing will be whether or not we can deliver on all of these ideas.
Well, obviously we want to deliver as much as possible, but the fact that they're even in discussion, it should be clear indicator to everyone involved, staff and non-staff community alike, is that Legacy is going to be something big, and the groundwork is being laid, and the thought process is there. We just have to get cracking and see exactly what out of all of this we can make happen, and make happen well. So, and I think with the group we have working on it, I think we're in good shape to see that happen. Jessica, I think you and I have a lot to think about and take some notes on and go research for our next episode. I hope we have left all of you listeners and all of the wonderful Prologue community with something to discuss, something to think about. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, whatever it may be, by all means, drop them down in the comments below, or you can send either Jessica or I a private message on the Prologue forums. My username there is Vero. Jessica's username is Jessica. I know it's super hard to remember. But otherwise, we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to another episode of ProBlogacy. Jessica, I wish you a wonderful evening.
Good, because I'm tired.
Go get some sleep. Good night. And to everyone else, safe journeys.
Warm. Anything compared to that frozen wasteland could be described with that one simple word. The land was unforgiving, the enemy that awaited them no more welcoming. 3 arduous years were spent in Northrend in an effort to defeat the fallen prince, who now presided over a new throne. They were successful, but returned to see their homes through new eyes. A victory that should have been sweet, laced with a bitter taste that overwhelmed the sense of accomplishment. For every soldier that returned to their hearth, dozens more fell to the Scourge and the Lich King. For every child dancing around a parent's ankles, there was another clutching at their memories, a fading image.